The grappling. Tom sat on a cold wooden bench in the changing room, looking at his pea-sized knob.
That is what?
At his pea-sized knob.
10.
He was building up the motivation to put on his skin-tight lycra wrestling gear, and if he put it on too quickly, the elastic might snap back, grace the tip of his nutsack, and have him dry heaving for the next few hours.
It's pretty accurate so far, to be fair.
Tom liked wrestling. In fact, he loved wrestling.
Yeah,
But unlucky for him, he was as thick as fermented pig shit. And Tom saw wrestling training in big bold letters in the corner of some sketchy website. He thought nothing more than to sign up for it. I mean, he liked wrestling, and that was wrestling. The logic clearly checks out.
Sorry, who wrote this one?
This
Samuel
is...
Benson.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Yeah. It had taken him 6 months of takedowns and waist locks to click that maybe he'd misread the fine print somewhere, and another 6 months to confirm that yes, he'd sign up to an amateur wrestling training program. Not the kind of wrestling that has people chanting your name throughout arenas as you fly through the air and smash some poor bastard's brains in with your elbow. The type of wrestling that nobody actually watches, kind of like men's volleyball or West Ham. Still, it was something to do. Sorry, I've just noticed this has page numbers, like it says page 2 at the bottom, like a proper novel. Anyway, still, it was something to do now. Plus, he'd set up a direct deposit to pay for his wrestling training. It'd be more uncomfortable to ring up his bank and cancel it, and then ring up the wrestling school and cancel that, than it would be to stick it out and put on his shiny blue gear in a freezing cold gym hall. There was one little light that made this somewhat bearable. Well, actually 2. First of all, he'd signed up at the exact same time as his good friend Andy, so at least he wasn't a lonely bastard getting his taint fondled by a random stranger. The second was...
Prefer doing that alone, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. The second was, well, they were both actually surprisingly good at it. They easily went from being the best newcomers to the best of the class, to the best of the actual district. Hell, they might actually be good enough to enter the national championships and maybe one day even compete in the Olympics. Talk about falling upwards. They were the envy of every single one of their classmates. So now, here they were, on a miserable Tuesday night in a poorly lit sports centre, about to start thrashing it out like 2 sodomites at a glory hole.
Whoa,
That's my fate.
just poetic metaphor out the window, just like 2 sodomites at a glory hole,
They were being gays like 2 gays.
Just they started thrashing it out like homosexuals. Anyway, Andy was sat at the other side of the locker room, all kitted out in his white spandex, which had been stained by his pre-game curry.
What?
He was scrolling.
Oh, fuck off! That's realistic, and you know it.
That's suggesting I shit myself.
I think it's literally curry. He was scrolling through his phone, sporting a barely visible semi. Not many things could give him this sort of sexual excitement these days, at least not since the incident. So it had to be some pretty heavy stuff. After Andy nipped to the toilets for a few seconds, they got oiled up and were ready to train. This was time to hulk up and be a man. Tom squeezed Andy's waist and instantly brought him to the ground. All of a sudden, the rumbling sound of a drain being emptied gurgled through the room as Andy's stomach started to reject the curry from before. Something was wrong. Was it the meat? Was it the spices? Did his pre-match wank screw up the semen propulsion and backtrack backwards through his penis, back into his ballsack? Whatever it was, it sounded worse than a guy playing the bagpipes being yeeted down a flight of stairs. They both casually ignored it. It's not like either of them were masters of bodily functions. Hell, Tom had only recently worked out how to put his dick back into his boxers after a piss. after a piss without the dick tuck releasing a second wind of piss. It's times like this where I'm so glad I'm not cis. After some back and forward, Andy was thrown to the ground once again, and yet again the gurgling sound echoed throughout the sports centre. The rancid meat had finished swirling around in his stomach and had begun to seep down into his intestines. This spooked Tom a little, leaving him open for an easy tossing to the floor. Tom flopped to the ground and was quickly mounted. Andy had him dead to rights. All he had to do was lock on a submission and he'd have beaten fair and square. But even gently twisting around unlocked the geyser of rectal gas and he let off the most disgusting fart of his life. Picture driving past an overturned meat truck that has been sitting in the sun for a few hours and you might come close to the smell. The fart spooked even Andy himself, and Tom managed to wriggle underneath his opponent to avoid the submission. Meanwhile, a little bubble had started to form in Andy's trunks. Oh no, there was more than just gas that had escaped through his anus, and it was only the tight spandex holding the little puddle of liquid in place, like a pus-filled spot.
Who has wrote this? This is filthy.
Is this the
Samuel
person who spoke to
Benson.
the Guardian?
I don't remember.
I hope not.
That.
This is disgusting.
Unfortunately for Tom, he instinctively poured at Andy's now bulging arse to push him away, only for a single fingernail to catch the skin-tight outfit and tear the fabric slightly. Oh fuck. Oh god. All of a sudden, the heavens broke and Tom watched his worst nightmare come true in super slow motion. The bubble contained about as much shit as your average condiment packet.
Well.
But Tom's frantic yells...
Oh, there's more good!
But Tom's frantic yells as it tripped directly into his eye managed to spook Andy some more. Spooking it made him fart harder and propel another round of gas and shit, which made Tom scream harder and spook Andy some more. It was a perpetual motion machine of shit. Just more and more toilet batter was being ejected from the tight hole of Andy's arse in increasing blasts. Oh, from a minor drop to a ketchup squirt to a spilled pint to a full-on shotgun blast of pressure of gas and shit. Eventually, they both lay there in a pool of sweat and arse gravy, whilst gasping for breath, wriggling around like oversized slugs with facial hair. Every time one of them came close to making it to their feet, the other would knock them slightly, and they'd both tumble straight back down into the shit soup. Finally, they both made it to their feet, took one last look at their disgusting soiled clothing, and ran to the showers in shame, dripping watery shit from their hands and face with every swing. The wrestling trainer cleared his throat and looked over to the rest of his pupils, with their faces ranging from embarrassment to abstract terror. Okay, lads, let's have the next pair.
Is that the end?
Yeah, that's it. That's the end.
Well, okay. Right, first of all, yeah, yeah, I am kind of speechless.